So he writes, it used to be the custom for the groom to become engaged to the virgin and consecrate her to himself in accordance with the faith of Moses and Israel. What do you mean it used to be the custom? What, Jews don't have engagements today and in the 19th century?
Right.
Of course they do. So what does he mean here? Let's read on. She would then be his wife in every way. Meaning there was this category. Today we say, you put a ring on a woman's finger and you say you're engaged. But in the Tanakh sense, to be engaged means something different. In fact, I don't know if we were going to get into this. In fact, I want to come back to it. But in Deuteronomy, it talks about that if a woman who is engaged has relations with a man who's not her fiance, it's a capital offense.
Exactly.
It's actually adultery.
Mm-hmm.
She would then be his wife in every way until the time of the marriage. He remains in his house. He remains in his own house or his father's house, and she is in her father's house. What? So it's this situation where the man lives in his own house, the woman lives in her father's house, and they're married, but they're not fully married. And this is the key point. So there's two phases of marriage in Jewish culture and in the Tanakh. There's erusin and nisuin. Erusin is engagement, and nisuin is marriage, is full marriage. And the difference is with nisuin, the second one, the man is living with the woman together in the same house and having relations. Up until that point, they're married, but they're not having relations with each other. And so today, when they perform a Jewish ceremony, a Jewish wedding, there's a lot going on. And there's actually two completely different ceremonies that take place. The erusin, the engagement, and the nisuin, the marriage. And they happen almost immediately one after the other. And the reason for that is that according to the Torah, if the woman who is engaged has, as we said, has relations outside of her husband, outside of the man she's engaged to, it's a great sin. And so to avoid that sin, Jewish tradition combined, they telescope these two events. So today when a Jewish man puts a ring on the woman's finger and asks her to marry him, and everybody calls them engaged, they're engaged only in the English sense, not in the Hebrew sense.
Do me a favor though. Can you
yes.
said, and I love what you said it. You said
Yeah.
in the Torah. Can you tell us where in Deuteronomy
Let's look at it. Let's look at it in the Torah. And here's where things get a little bit complicated. So again, the word here is aras. They translate it usually betrothed in many translations. Exodus 22 verse 15 or 16 in the English, when a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged to be married and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. Okay, so if the man has relations with her while being engaged to her, they're husband and wife. That is, they're living together, they're husband and wife. If he has it without being engaged to her, he just seduces her, and in the heat of passion, she consents and has relations with him. Well, then he has a whole different situation that I don't know if you want to get into this, but he has to pay the bride price to the father, and then in Deuteronomy it says he can't divorce her. He's actually bound to her. So because he essentially he didn't do it right. What he was supposed to do is first enter into the engagement. Once the engagement was agreed upon by all parties, then they could then become husband and wife. Now, why wait between the two? And the answer is all kinds of reasons. Maybe the woman was too young to have sex, right? If she's not old enough to be physically married, she could be dedicated to him, which was very common in the ancient world, but she wasn't ready to have relations, so they would wait. Or maybe the man didn't have enough money to have his own household, and rather than live with the parents or live with her parents, they're waiting to raise enough funds to be able to move forward in that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's erusin, or the word aras, to engage, to become engaged. And then the key passage we're going to look at here is
before you move from
22.
aras, can I ask you a question, Nehemia?
Yeah.
This is just a little bit of your expertise here. When you looked at aras in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew versus what you just read in the Torah, are they spelled differently?
They're spelled absolutely, and that's because in biblical Hebrew we have the letter sin, which is the same graphic symbol as shin, except in shin the dot's on the right, and in sin the dot's on the left. So in later Hebrew, the sin essentially ceased to be used, and it was replaced with samach, which is another letter that sounds like sa.
Now, why did I ask you that question? And folks, I want those that are listening. I want to slow down, Nehemia, before you move any further.
Okay.
The reason I asked you that question is there's a lot of people that are listening that are just in their mind, they're thinking Hebrew. Absolutely not. There's absolutely no way that I'm ever going to be able to deal with it. What you just did is you gave us something that people would trip over. They would be looking in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew and they'd say, I can't find this word in the Tanakh.
Right.
What you just explained
Yeah.
takes a huge burden. And again, this is something that we've experienced in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, but people may not see it. They'll say, well, this word doesn't exist. And you just gave us a simple explanation,
Yeah.
but
Now to give the
unimportant.
complicated explanation, not to go too deep here, but it is assumed,
Assumed.
it's assumed that originally each letter in the Hebrew had a different sound. And if that's true, then sin and samach, which today both are pronounced as S, had some slight difference in pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
And by Second Temple times, that was definitely not the case. By Second Temple times, sin and samach were used interchangeably, and essentially samach tends to displace sin just because it's easier to distinguish. If you don't have little dots, I know what a samach sounds like. If I put the symbol for shin, it could be sh or sa. Samach was always sa. So that's the reason it displaced it. Also probably under the influence of Aramaic. Okay, so the other word, this is where things get a bit complicated. There isn't actually a word, meaning in Hebrew we have a number of different words, which is, in later Hebrew it's nasa. It appears sometimes with that meaning in the Tanakh as well, which is literally to lift up a wife, to take a wife. Right? So you have to become engaged to a wife and to take a wife, okay? You have lehitchaten as well, which is to marry a wife, right? But all three of those, to take, to lift up, and to engage, to marry, are the second phase, whereas to be engaged is the first phase. Deuteronomy 22:23 is the parallel to Exodus 22:15. And this is really important. You can't just read the one verse without the other, because you won't get the full picture.